the Smith & Wesson M&P-15 Victory. So these are they're calling these the XV or the M&P-15 Victory. These just came out this year, and we got one. So let's take one apart. Let's go over the basics. This is a 16-inch barrel, carbine length gas system. It is 5.56 1-in-8.5R barrel. It's 4140, by the way, not 4150 chrome moly vanadium. 7075 T6 4-star burn lower. It's got a flat trigger shoe. It's got a B5 handle. It's got a B5 stock. Mil-spec tube. It's staked, kind of. Rear M-bus, front A-frame, non-free floated. So this is fairly entry level, right? All right, so let's crack it open. So that's a mil-spec carbine spring and a 3.0 ounce buffer with the weird coating and the cheaper rubber on it. So on a carbine length gas system, that's not what I'd put in here. I'd put at least an H, maybe an H2, and we really like the tub flat wire. So that's cheaped out. AR-15 cut. Everything else looks fairly ordinary. Mil-spec charging handle. Oh yeah. Ooh. So it's a flat wire trigger, or sorry, flat shoe trigger, but this is the exact same trigger that they use to hammer and the internals as the mil-spec one that they did in the Sport 2. So this is super janktacular feeling. Yeah, so there's like 2 creeps in it, and it's definitely mil-spec. So all they really did was change the trigger shoe. I can see the marks in here from the machine that it came off of. That's kind of normal. They're still using the Smith & Wesson cast parts. These are pretty craptacular. They're not so bueno. But they're functional. I have yet to actually see one not function. It's just some of these, especially this catch right here with this paddle size, are not compatible if you want to use like a bad lever or something like that. Make releases standard mil-spec. Okay, let's take some shit apart and spec stuff out. So let's check the upper dimensions and timing. This is a Midwest Industry URR. Nice. Okay, that's a pass. So these are #1 taper pins, and they are backwards from the Colt. The Colts actually go the other way. It's no big deal. It's just something to be aware of. Yes, I used 3 different punches to take these out. There we go. Oh, come on, buddy. There it went. It is definitely in. There we go. So pins came out. We'll check the gas tube, gas block, etc. So let's check the gas port. 063. 0.64, 0.65 won't go all the way in. It'll go in about halfway, really. So 0.64 to 0.65, somewhere in that range, just depending upon if that's a burr holding it up or not. Mil spec carbine on a 14.5 is 0.62. So this is a couple of thou bigger, but still acceptable. I mean, I've seen some companies make them just massively gigantic. So 0.65 is acceptable, especially on a lesser expensive firearm, an AR. It'll run some of the cheaper ammo better that way. You have to keep in mind that mil spec is meant for actual NATO ammo, which is at a higher spec, higher chamber pressure. So having a little bit larger port's not that big of a deal. It's probably helpful for most ammo. All right, let's check the barrel nut torque. So this is set at 55. Okay, so it's at least 55. $65. Come on, buddy, get in there. Here we go. Okay, it's 65. $75. $85. Oh, it just popped a little. So 85. Yeah, so it just came loose. So 85-ish, maybe a touch more. It's a little on the heavy side, but it's a timed barrel nut, so you do what you got to do, right? The barrel nut is lubricated in threads with Permatex. So the feed ramps aren't the worst in the world. So they have outside hooks. So those are where the feed ramps, where the barrel and the upper meet, and they're really small. They're not that big of a deal. And you can see that there's not. This is hard to do. Sorry. You can see that there's no hangover, no overhang from the barrel to the lower, so that's not going to snag the bullet tip. Not bad. This is super craptacular. Yeah, so there's a lot of space in there. That's just sloppy. That's specs on the upper, essentially. I mean, is it going to kill your accuracy? A little bit. Is it going to make the gun not operational? No, it's just going to affect your accuracy. So that's the roll pin that holds in the forward assist right here. Come on, focus. And you can see that it's protruding a little bit out the bottom. It's got plenty of room here in the top for it to be set up. It's just a little bit of slop. Looks like there's a couple of impact marks there. Once again, is this going to make the gun not run? No, it's not. It's just a little thing, little minor thing. It is staked very well to the sides. Does not have YSF fasteners. I don't see any initial markings on the bolt or the BCG. The BCG is cut AR-15 back here. No scallop. Yay! All right, let's take it apart and check some shit. All right, I'm checking firing pin protrusion here, and it just barely touches on the minimum, and on the max it clears no problem, and it moves freely. So this is marked mag MP, mag particle, which I couldn't see until I took it out, but it is marked MP. So I got to tell you, I spec'd this off camera, and it is phosphated. It is chrome lined in both the gas key and in the bolt run, and it's tight. So this thing's actually tighter than some of the bolt carrier groups I'm seeing from Microbest. The specs on it were within, I'd say, 1/1000th of an inch on each one of the specs I checked, and the bolt is actually within 1/1000th of each one of the dimensions. It's a really tight bolt and bolt carrier group. I'm really kind of shocked on how efficient this should be in the gun. So the extractor is a 4-coil spring with an inner buffer and a donut, which is fine. I would change it to a 5-coil with the inner buffer because that's what I prefer, but this will actually function. So cam pin's fine. It's not fancy or marked or anything, but it's definitely fine. So yeah, I'm really impressed. I wasn't expecting this thing to be as efficient or to have as good a tolerance and specs as it does, but it's actually really nice. And the ejector is really super tight. So yeah, it's pretty cool. Ooh. It's a little big. So that holes, so most of these are oblong, and they're made like that. This one's a little big. I'd like to see it about 1/1000th of an inch tighter, but once again, it's not a game changer. It's not a huge deal. All right, let's check the trigger. Uh, 677. It's 514. 510. Let's do it one more time. It's 514. So it's 5 3/4 pounds is kind of a good average for that. I don't know if you saw when I was pulling it. It does have a hitch. See that hitch right there? Boink. And then another little one, and then it breaks. So, mil spec, flat shoe. Ta-da! Final thoughts. This is a Smith & Wesson M&P-15 Sport 2 with different furniture. That's my final thought on this. They made some cosmetic and aesthetic changes to it, but it's really just a Smith & Wesson M&P-15 Sport 2, which is not necessarily a bad thing, but take it for what it is. These are the differences. B5 stock, B5 handle, B5 non-floated handguard. This has M-lock on it already, which is nice. This is a much better grip. It's at the right angle. It's got a swell in the back to push your hand away from the trigger a little bit more. And the B5 stocks are pretty damn good. I was very impressed with the dimensions of the bolt carrier group in this. This is a better bolt carrier group than I have seen in the Smith & Wesson M&P-15 Sport 2s. The Sport 2s are not this good. I will say that is an upgrade. How big of an upgrade is it? I don't know. Everyone's kind of making pretty decent bolt carrier groups if they're paying attention out there. It's not that hard anymore. So I'm glad they did that. I typically see gas ports mil spec on these. So I usually see 061 to 062. This one's a little bit bigger. I suspect that they did that because they were getting feedback that some of the weak 223 ammunition was having problems running in these. I'm okay with that. This is not a gun that's set up to shoot nothing but mil spec in it, and so if it's running a little fast, that's fine with mil spec ammo like M193. But if you're going to do that, change your buffer to an H, You can still use the carbine spring, but the reality is when we sell these, we recommend at least an H, possibly an H2, just depending upon how they're running it and what they're running it with regularly, and definitely a tub flat wire or a spring co. We like the tub flat wires; they last longer. We like the way that they stack better, but it's a push. Pick one. Just don't use the 2000 round standard mil spec spring, because they're just, I mean, we've moved on. We have better technology. Anyway, the trigger, it is mil spec. It's a Smith & Wesson M&P-15 trigger. I mean, I have a Sport 2 here right behind me, so I was comparing them as I did this. It's got a flat shoe instead of a round shoe. It looks like it's pushed back a little bit further. You know, okay, so the trigger is back here instead of up here a little bit. Not a big deal. It may make it a little bit more comfortable for the average human hand. I don't know. It's hard to gauge that. So this is a $900 firearm. Okay. This is a $750 firearm. Right? This is a Sport 2. This one came with the Magpul grip on the front instead of the B5 grip on the front. So you're essentially getting the same grip on this one and this one. This one has crappier furniture. I don't like the bolts in these as much, okay? Oops, sorry. I think that the specs on this one, which we could have just gotten a good one. I don't know. I haven't seen a whole lot of these yet, but initially the specs on them are pretty good. So is it worth, you know, $750 to $775 depending upon the configuration versus $900? It's close. It's definitely close. So you're dealing with at least $60 here, another $20 here. That's $80. Okay. If you got this one, you don't really have to change the handguard. I actually prefer this handguard over this one, but both will work. This one, in my opinion, is just a little bit stronger. It's also a little bit wider too, so it's kind of a personal preference. And then the bolt specs. Yeah, you're probably looking at about $150 in upgrades in general. I do think it's a little bit better gun. Why do we carry these? Not everybody wants to drop $1,500 on an AR. Some people want to stay under $1,000 and still get something that's respectable, that if you add a few parts to it, it's going to run just fine, especially law enforcement. There's a lot of discussion about duty grade out there on the internets. What does duty grade mean? It doesn't mean shit. Duty grade is a made-up term. Duty grade means, well, I think this is what the cops should use because it's more reliable. Well, maybe. I've seen some duty grade guns that I would not use. And I've seen match grade that wasn't match grade. And I've seen combat grade, which wasn't combat grade. So these are all sales pitches for the most part. There's no quantitative and or accepted qualitative standard for any of those. It's like Magnum. What the hell does that mean? Well, if it's champagne, it means you get a bigger bottle. Does it mean that the cartridge is Magnum? I don't know. 300 Win Mag versus 300 PRC. They're basically the same, but one's not a Magnum. So don't get stuck around some of these discussions on some of these terms. They're sales pitches for all intents and purposes. We sell these to cops pretty regular. We also upgrade them to make sure that they're as reliable as possible for law enforcement use, which means we're changing buffers, we're changing springs, we're fixing the really super shitty staking job here. I mean, let's be real, man. That is bullshit, okay? That's a hey, we made it look like it's staked, but it's not really a stake. It's just kind of like a meh. Little things like that. We'll go through it. We'll make sure everything that's set up and ready to go. We'll make sure, they want a new charging handle. We'll throw that in there. And we'll set them up so that they're functional. These are more than acceptable for law enforcement use. That doesn't say that this would be my choice. But everybody has to make different choices on firearms, and having something that you can actually rely on with a few parts changed in it versus dropping $1,500 to $2,000 on a really high quality firearm, well, that's what the different firearms are all about. So this is not a bad product. It's not the one that I would use if I was law enforcement, but I would be hesitant to say that it is not acceptable for law enforcement use. It's also fine for entertainment use. It would be a great gun to use to kind of learn the platform and build and change and modify and upgrade as you went along. So yeah, I'd recommend them, but excuse me, I'd recommend them for very specific purposes in a very specific price range. A lot of the other guns in these price ranges just are not as good as these are. And that's kind of basically what it is. I mean, if you want a PSA, fine, get one, but it's not going to be as good as these firearms are.